You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Helen Mackenzie, and today is Friday, June 17th, 2022.
6.
One of the most rewarding parts of being a procurement practitioner is really getting stuck into a category. And I love doing the analysis and being able to put forward different ideas and options with my stakeholders. But I found coming up with ideas month after month wasn't always easy, particularly when I'd managed a category for a while. So I always found it useful to hear what other people were doing in their categories and to see if there was something I could use. And the great news is we've got exactly an event for you to do just that. Join us on August 11th between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern as we come together virtually for Categorypalooza. It's Art of Procurement's very own summer festival of category insights. We'll be discussing a wide range of categories along with our partners Fine Tune and Procurement IQ, and topics like inflation and supplier relationships are bound to come up. We're running a 3-hour-long event on a platform that allows you to chat with other attendees and engage with speakers in real time, and all of the discussions will be live. So sign up to book your ticket for Categorypalooza 2022 using that link in the show notes.
5.
This week's podcast was recorded on the conference floor of SAP's recent Sapphire event in Orlando, Florida, and Phil Ideson caught up with Senior Vice President of Product Strategy for Procurement Solutions at SAP, Barbara Farouk. Now, during the podcast, they discussed a number of research studies that SAP had commissioned with The Economist, IDC, and the Harvard Business Review. And during this segment that I've chosen for you today, Barbara and Phil discussed the changes between globalization and localization that have happened as a result of the pandemic.
And what's interesting when you think about this topic and expand it, outside of our research, The Economist wrote about something called globalization, which was that this remarkable trend of globalization is kind of flattening. There's more nearshore happening. Nearshore manufacturing has been driven by robotic manufacturing and AI and all that wonderful stuff. But what the pandemic has taught us is that for a lot of the people that you need, doesn't really matter where they are. Right? So, it's funny where you might have a situation slowly where goods manufacturing could become more and more nearshore, but the services could actually become offshore.
It's kind of a reverse.
It's kind of a reverse, right? And that is actually a procurement challenge. If we do that, right? At least procurement should have the ability to show that an organization could flex in that manner if required. Procurement and supply chain, right? And I think that's some of what we are learning as well. We've all done now telehealth with doctors. I never thought that would pop. But even now, as we're slowly we've come out of lockdowns. I had a recent appointment. And I said to my doctor, well, can we just do it by telehealth because I don't want to drive, right?
Right.
It's
sit and wait for half an hour. And then,
exactly. We can just do it because it's not something that required any sort of a physical examination, right? And I think you will see that a lot in terms of services in general, where one asks the question, well, does this person actually need to be physically on site, right? Or can the work happen remotely? And if it can happen remotely, then why would you restrict yourself to a labor pool in any sort of geographic constraint, right? And I think those are all the questions that need to be answered. And those are the things, apart from the cost savings.
Now that's food for thought, isn't it? You can hear the full conversation between Barbara and Phil wherever you choose to listen to podcasts.
4.
Recently, we've had a real spotlight on supplier diversity. Earlier in the year, Kelly Barner's exploration of the topic over on LinkedIn produced a wide range of opinions and insights and some great conversations. And this week, in our podcast series Procurement for the People, host Catherine McCleary explores the challenges of both the buy and the sell side of supplier diversity programs with special guest Jason Roberts, who's the CEO and founder of Collider. Now, Jason's a real visionary when it comes to supplier diversity, and I loved this quote for him. Imagine a place where you no longer have to slice off a piece of the pie for someone, because they all now have a seat at the table and they all feel welcomed and they all know they can go for it and the best person will win. That's a place we want to get to. Unfortunately, it'll take a few years to get there, but when speaking to those large corporates, that's the vision they tell me they want to have in the world, that the world really does strip itself of the need to break people down into buckets and silos. Wow, that's inspiring. To hear more from Jason and his conversation with Catherine, check out the episode at artofprocurement.com or in the main Art of Procurement feed in your podcasting app.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
Now, there's been an interesting discussion happening on LinkedIn, sparked by an article written by procurement veteran Colin Cram, and he's considering whether it's time we ditch savings as a measure of procurement performance. And true to form, there's a lot of debate about adding value, managing risk, and whether savings is the right thing to use at all. For me, I love the challenge of delivering impact for my organisation through the contracts and the relationships with suppliers that we put in place. But I always kept in mind the contribution that delivering all that for a lower cost could make to the overall outcomes of the business. So for me, performance measurement was always a savings plus conversation. How about you?
2.
Managing demand by substituting one product for a similar one is something us procurement people can try where supply is limited or we're trying to manage cost increases. And it seems that substitution is on the agenda in Australia, where KFC have switched from lettuce to cabbage after reporting hitting a bit of a supply chain iceberg. Now, sticking with challenges in supply, gamers across the world may continue to have to wait for their new PS5 as Sony report ongoing difficulties in meeting demand. A Sony spokesperson reported that they're taking action like changing suppliers and also changing design to cope with these procurement issues. Now, luckily for me, I managed to source a PS5 locally for a recent birthday in the Mackenzie household. Long live near sourcing.
1.
Last week, we ran a snap poll to see what the biggest obstacle you've come across is to securing that most important ROI from your new source-to-pay platform. And the results show that rather than the selection process being a problem, implementation or adoption are the biggest challenges. Now, as someone who's been involved in a number of new system implementations, those results don't strike me as unusual. But what was surprising is that we seem to be repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So how can we learn and get that new system implemented and the ROI delivered? Well, join us on June 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where we'll be hosting our next AOP Live with Corecentric.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.
Now, the session is aptly entitled Digital Procurement is Not Easy, Don't Go It Alone. And it's going to be a session where you can ask the Corecentric team questions about why the business case we develop for tech investment rarely helps us during, post and... The session is aptly entitled Digital Procurement's Not Easy, Don't Go It Alone. And it's going to be a session where you can ask the Corecentric team questions about why the business case we develop for tech investment rarely helps us during and post implementation. Register now to join us on June 21st for a live session with no slides or scripts that are driven by your questions, so you never quite know what you're going to hear. Just go to artofprocurement.com/calendar to find out more. And you can find all the links associated with the stories mentioned today at the show notes page for this episode at artofprocurement.com/podcast.